Hi everybody, it's Sabrina. Welcome to my channel. Today I plan on talking about my thoughts on the ACOTAR, or A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I did recently finish the last book in the series of Court of Silver Flames. I finished this book this week, and so now that I'm finally finished with it, I do plan on talking about my thoughts on all of the books, kind of a little bit of a summary of the books. I do plan on talking about the general plot of each book, so if you don't want any spoilers at all, you don't want any information about the books, you kind of just want to go in blind and not kind of know what happens or have an idea of what happens, you may not want to watch the video, but I do plan on talking about a brief plot. I don't plan on giving any big spoilers away, but I do plan on talking about a little bit of the plot of each book to start, and then my ratings of the books, and then my kind of, at the end of the video, my thoughts on the series as a whole and whether or not I would recommend this series as a whole. So I'm going to start with talking about the A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first book in the series. So this book, basically the premise of this book, or the plot of this book, is it is based on Beauty and the Beast, and it is about a character, the main character, whose name is Feyre. She lives in kind of a small town, a small cottage, with her two sisters and her father. Her father used to be a wealthy merchant, and he, gets injured, and he kind of loses his wealth, and they become pretty poor. Feyre kind of has to learn to fend for her family. She kind of becomes this provider. Her father's injured. He's no longer able to do so for them. So Feyre kind of takes on that role for them. And so she goes out in the woods, she hunts for food for them and pelts of animals to kind of sell at the local market. And one day when she's out in the woods, she does come across a wolf. And she kills this wolf, and she doesn't realize, or she has an idea, she thinks it might be a fairy, but she's, under some pretty severe circumstances as far as, worrying her family's going to starve. And so she takes a chance, and she goes ahead and she kills this wolf. Well, she goes back home, and it turns out that that wolf was a fairy, and another fairy has come and is demanding to take with him whoever ended up killing that wolf, kind of as payment or payback for, killing one of their own. So she does agree to go with him, and he takes her back to this fairy kingdom. He is a high lord, a very high, powerful fairy, part of the ruling class. The fairy world is called Prythian. It's split up into 7 different courts, and each one is ruled by a high lord. And so this court, this high lord is high lord of the Spring Court. So that's where Feyre is. It talks about, kind of her experiences with being in this court, kind of getting used to the fairy world, since she is human. And it kind of talks a little bit about the bond her and the fairy, his name is Tamlin, develop. They develop kind of a little bit of a relationship as the story progresses. And then it turns out there's this curse that Feyre could have broken, and she doesn't. And so he gets taken away by this evil queen, and she kind of tries to find him and fight for him, and she's got to go through these trials in order to kind of break this curse. So that's kind of the ending of the story, or how the story plays out. My thoughts on this book was that it was kind of slow in the beginning. It didn't really pick up until that ending, in my opinion. I really, I was kind of bored. I was interested enough to keep reading it. I never felt like I was going to DNF this book or not finish it, but it was a little slower in the beginning, but when she does go, to save him, and she fights in these trials, it definitely picks up a lot and is very interesting. And I will say it's nice to kind of see a strong female character, one who's, fighting for the man instead of the man fighting for the woman. So I do like that point of this book. I do like that. And like I said, the ending is very good. So I do think this book is worth reading, and it did get me into the series. I rated this book a 4 stars. So the second book in the series is called A Court of Mist and Fury. And the premise of this book is, in this first book, like I said, Feyre goes through a lot of trials, trying to save Tamlin, You know, her and Tamlin, after this book, have a lot of trauma. They both experienced a lot and went through a lot of hardship. And they're both a little traumatized and are kind of trying to recover from this trauma. But they're not doing a very good job at it. They're not doing a very good job at supporting each other. And that's kind of what's happening in the beginning of this book. And she does end up kind of developing a close relationship with another High Lord from a different court, one who is kind of portrayed in A Court of Thorns and Roses to be kind of a little bit of an enemy. But she does develop a relationship with him throughout this book, and that's kind of the main premise of this book, is this relationship that they build together. You know, she's kind of healing from that trauma, and she's doing it alongside with this character, and there's lots of kind of little side quests in this book that are really interesting. So it is still pretty action-packed. So it has the action, it has the romance, and it's kind of a slow burn romance. It's kind of like a little bit of an enemies to lovers, where she really doesn't like him at all in the beginning. She thinks he's the enemy. And then she kind of learns more about him and learns about him, and, you know, that he's not this terrible person that he was originally thought or portrayed to be. And as they're going through these quests together, and it does slowly turn into this, you know, beautiful relationship. So I really, really liked this book. I thought it was very well done. Like I said, a perfect balance between action and romance. I rated this book a 5 stars. I think that this book was absolutely my favorite in the series. I 100% recommend this book. So, all right. And now we get into the third book in the series, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin. So this book is kind of, you know, her and that character in the relationship together. Her and Feyre and the other character's name is Rhysand. They're in this relationship together, and it's talking about, you know, kind of this war that's unfolding. So I already mentioned there's the fairy kingdom, which is called Prythian, and it is ruled by, you know, split into 7 different courts, each ruled by its own High Lord. And the courts aren't very united. They're kind of their own separate, you know, identities, and a lot of the High Lords don't get along. They butt heads. And so there's this war that's coming against this other kingdom called Hybern, and they have a really big army. And the point of this book is that Feyre and Rhysand are trying to unite the 7 courts, so that way they have a chance of fighting against this bigger enemy, because alone they stand no chance, they will fall. And so trying to get the kingdoms united, or the courts united, so that way they can, you know, build up this army and this force in order to stop the evil king of Hybern. So this book has a lot of the politics in it. It has a lot of, you know, action. It's very action-packed. It does still discuss some relationships. There is some, you know, romance still in this, because it still has the characters from the second book. But definitely I would say the bigger plot of this book is that war and those events. So if you're more of an action-packed, or you like action, I think you will really like this book. The ending is, you know, pretty good. I did like the ending. It has some twists and some unexpected things. So I think that this book was very good as well. This was probably my second favorite book in the series after A Court of Mist and Fury. I would rate this book a 4.5 stars. So I highly recommend this book as well. I also really enjoyed this book. And that brings us to the fourth book in the series, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight. And I will be honest, I did not like this book at all. It did not have a plot. It seemed very pointless to me. And to be quite honest and frank, I'm sorry, Sarah J. Maas, I don't know why you even wrote this book. I heard a lot of people online comparing it to the Christmas special of a TV series or TV show. And I would say that's pretty accurate. I mean, really, the whole thing that this book was about was kind of, you know, as I mentioned, there was a war in this book. There's a lot of action and things that are happening. And this is kind of just talking about the characters' lives and experiences after the war, and them celebrating the winter solstice, which is kind of like their Christmas. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, if you just like a happy-go-lucky story about the characters with not really a lot of plot, you may still like this book. But for me, there has to be a plot. There has to be a rhyme or a reason. This book just didn't have that. So for me, this wasn't really something I enjoyed. One thing that's kind of interesting about this book is it does have different characters' point of views. So, each chapter kind of has like a different character that's talking in the chapter, or, the perspective of a different character. And it talks about Kisian's point of view, it talks about Raisen's and Feyre's, and, lots of different characters throughout the series. So, if that's something that sounds kind of interesting to you, if you are interested in kind of seeing different characters' point of views besides just Feyre's, you might like this book. But for me, it just didn't do it. I just wasn't really a big fan. I'll be honest, I thought about DNFing it. I almost thought about not finishing it, but I really wanted to read the last book in the series, and I thought that I needed to read this book in order to do so. So I did stick with it. I did finish it. It is short, so, that was the good thing for me, is at least it wasn't a long book I had to try and sit through. It was only 229 pages. So it is a quick read. It's a little bit more of a novella instead of a novel. So it is quick to get through, but like I said, to me it was just incredibly boring. I would rate it like a 2 stars, if I'm being nice. If I'm not being nice, I would rate it like a 1.5 stars. So that's just my thoughts on this book. All right, and then the last book in the series, A Court of Silver Flames. So this book is actually written from a different character's perspective. It's written from, instead of our usual main character, Feyre, this is written from her sister's point of view, her sister Nesta. And it is talking about kind of Nesta's, growth and character development, because Nesta does have a lot of trauma, especially from the events that unfolded in this 3rd book. She does go through a lot in this book. There's lots of terrible things that happen, and Nesta does have a lot of trauma, after the events that happened in the war. And because of that trauma, she does kind of distance herself from her family, her friends, and she develops some not so healthy coping mechanisms. And so this book is kind of the journey of her character growth and her character development. There is a little bit of action in here. Nesta does go through some training. She is learning to fight and kind of become a warrior, which is kind of interesting. I love, again, the strong female character narrative that, girls can be strong warriors as well. So that is present in this book, very strongly so in this book. And it talks a little bit also, too, about the relationship development between Nesta and one of the other characters, kind of the relationship they develop. This book does have a lot of spice in it. So there's spice in all of the books, but definitely I would say this book has the most out of all of it in the series. I will be honest, I don't mind spice. It doesn't deter me from reading a book per se, but I don't actively seek it out necessarily. I do like romance, but specifically spice, it depends on how it's done, in my opinion, and I think it's a little overdone in this book, if I'm being honest. If you really like spice, I think you will really like this book. For me, it was just kind of meh. I would rate this book a 3.5 stars. I did still enjoy it. I still had an enjoyable time reading it, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites. And honestly, I think I would have been fine not reading it, but it was still enjoyable. I still, had a decent time reading it. But if you really like the thought of character development, a character's journey of overcoming trauma and, some spice and relationship developing, I think you probably really would like this book, because I feel like this book, I've heard a lot of people online saying that they either really, really loved it or it wasn't necessarily for them. So if those are things that sound interesting to you and you are into those things, then I think you really would enjoy this book. But like I said, I personally would probably rate this book about a 3.5 stars. And so my thoughts on the series as a whole, overall, the series as a whole, I think I would rate a 4-star series, which is pretty good. I think that's very, very high. I did very much enjoy the series as a whole. If I had to recommend, or if I had to go back and say what I thought as far as my own reading journey and experience with it, I could have probably done with the first 3 books. you know, the fourth and the fifth were just okay, but I really, really did enjoy the first 3 books. If I had to just rate the first 3 books in this series, I would probably give it a 4.5 to a 5-star rating. But overall, I still did enjoy the series, and there's supposed to be another book coming out. I don't know yet if I will read that book. I think I'll just wait and see, you know, once it does come out, what other people are saying about it, you know, kind of what it's about. It may be something I'm interested in. I'll just have to wait and see. I probably would end up reading it because, like I said, I did enjoy the series as a whole, but we'll kind of wait and see, you know, once that book does eventually come out. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for watching this video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful, especially if you haven't read this series yet and you are wondering, you know, whether or not it is worth your time or if it's something that you would be interested in. I definitely still think it's worth it. I still think it was, you know, a good series. I did very much enjoy it, and it did kind of, like I said, get me a little bit out of a reading slump I mentioned in a previous video. You know, it's been a long time since I've really gotten into reading, and I did really love the fantasy world that was built in this book, the romance that's included with the fantasy, so definitely do think it's worth the time. So again, hopefully you found this helpful. See you again in another video. Bye.